At 3 in the morning, while the city slept under winter stone and candle smoke, power changed hands in silence. No armies moved. No treaties were signed. Yet the future of Italy shifted inside a locked chamber, measured not in ink or blood, but in proof. What happened that night was recorded, witnessed, and sealed with a precision so unsettling that it was hidden for centuries. This was not romance. It was a test, and failure would have meant erasure. History often teaches us to look for power in thrones, councils, and battlefields. But the most decisive moments are sometimes hidden in places we are taught not to look at all. In Renaissance Italy, marriage was not a personal union. It was an instrument, a contract designed to stabilize borders, silence rivals, and guarantee bloodlines. And no marriage embodied that reality more ruthlessly than the union between Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este. On the surface, this was a lavish wedding between two of Italy's most powerful houses. Beneath it lay fear, calculation, and an unspoken rule. If the marriage could not be proven beyond doubt, it could be destroyed just as easily. What unfolded on the night of February 2nd, 1502, was not scandal for its own sake. It was protocol. A protocol so severe that a woman's body became evidence and intimacy became statecraft. This story matters because it strips away the fantasy of the Renaissance. It reveals a world where survival required strategy, where reputation could kill, and where a woman learned to transform vulnerability into permanence. The year was 1502, a moment when Italy was less a nation and more a fractured chessboard. Duchies, city-states, papal territories, and foreign powers collided in a constant struggle for dominance. France watched from the north. Spain pressed from the south. The Holy Roman Empire hovered, waiting for weakness. At the center of this instability stood Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI. His papacy was not merely spiritual, it was aggressively political. His children were deployed like envoys. Marriages arranged with the same cold logic as military alliances. Among them, Lucrezia Borgia became both the most valuable and the most vulnerable. By 22, Lucrezia had already survived her marriages. The first collapsed under accusations that humiliated her publicly and erased the union entirely. The second ended with her husband's death under circumstances no one at court dared to question aloud. These experiences taught her a brutal lesson early. In this world, a woman's legitimacy was never assumed. It had to be proven, defended, and reinforced again and again. When negotiations began with the House of Este in Ferrara, both sides understood the stakes. The Este family was powerful, but cautious. An alliance with the Borgias promised protection and influence, but it also invited scrutiny, rumor, and danger. The price was high. Lucrezia's dowry alone could finance armies. But gold was not the true currency here. The true cost would be paid in certainty. In Renaissance aristocracy, a marriage without proven consummation was fragile. Rivals could challenge it. Enemies could petition annulment. Legitimacy, inheritance, and succession all depended on had happened after the wedding ceremony ended. This was not private morality, it was public. Survival. Ferrara could not afford ambiguity, and so protocols were set in motion. Silent observers, written confirmation, a structure designed not to intrude, but to protect the alliance from attack. The marriage bed was transformed into a courtroom where the verdict would determine the future of a dynasty. The date chosen was February 2nd, the Feast of the Purification, a day symbolizing cleansing, legitimacy, and renewal. The symbolism was deliberate. Sacred time was being used to sanctify political reality. Lucrezia arrived in Ferrara not as an innocent bride, but as a woman shaped by exposure to power's darkest mechanics. Contemporary writers described her beauty, but beauty was not her most dangerous asset. She understood perception, she understood risk, and she understood that failure, even perceived failure, would follow her for the rest of her life. Her husband, Alfonso d'Este, was no passive figure either. He was an engineer of war, a ruler forged by practicality rather than ceremony. He knew exactly what would be required of him, and what doubt could cost his house. This was not a romantic pairing, it was a mutual recognition of necessity. Yet something unexpected occurred before the wedding night itself. During a private meeting weeks earlier, Lucrezia and Alfonso discovered a genuine compatibility. It did not erase the political framework surrounding them, but it complicated it. What was meant to be a controlled ritual now carried human unpredictability. Ferrara, on the night of the wedding, became a stage. The procession through the city was theatrical, designed to communicate unity, strength, and prosperity, but behind the walls of the palace, a different preparation was underway. Officials positioned themselves not out of curiosity, But duty, records were prepared, silence was enforced. This was not voyeurism, it was insurance. Inside the ducal chambers, everything reflected the weight of the moment. Tapestries depicting war and alliance, candlelight flickering against stone, symbols everywhere, reminding both participants that this was not simply about them. Entire families, territories, and futures were bound to what would follow. The first consummation fulfilled its role, not as spectacle, but as confirmation. It established what needed to be established. Yet for Ferrara, one confirmation was not enough. The stakes were too high, the risks too severe. That was the enemy. So the ritual continued. Each stage reinforced the last. Each moment added another layer of certainty. Observations were noted discreetly, not details, but conclusions. Enough to eliminate challenge, enough to silence future accusation. To modern eyes, this feels invasive, even cruel. But within that world, it was protection. Without documentation, Lucrezia could be discarded. Alfonso could be undermined. Their enemies would exploit any opening. By dawn, the alliance was sealed in a way no army could undo. What makes this night extraordinary is not the act itself, but what it represented. Lucrezia Borgia understood that her survival depended on permanence. She had seen how easily a woman could be erased through rumor, ailment, or suspicion. This time, she left no space for doubt. She transformed the most vulnerable position a woman could occupy into the most fortified. Alfonso, too, proved something essential. Not only capability, but composure under pressure. In a world obsessed with lineage and strength, he demonstrated that he could endure scrutiny without fracture. That mattered more than affection. Together, they created a precedent. The records from that night became a shield. When rivals whispered, the documentation answered. When alliances wavered, the proof held firm. This marriage could not be undone quietly. Any attack would be overt, costly, and dangerous. And so, Lucrezia's position changed almost overnight. No longer a liability imported from Rome, she became central to Ferrara's stability. To remove her would be to invite chaos. For the first time in her life, her presence ensured order rather than disruption. This is the psychological pivot of her story. Lucrezia was no longer reacting to power. She was shaping it. Yet power never rests. It attracts resistance. Within Ferrara, another woman walks carefully, Isabella d'Este. Accustomed to being the axis around which court life revolved, recognized the shift immediately. Influence was moving. Attention was redirecting. A silent rivalry intensified. What followed was not open conflict, but psychological warfare, subtle gestures, strategic alliances, competing networks of loyalty. In this environment, intimacy itself became leverage. Lucrezia had learned that survival required redundancy. One alliance was never enough. Protection had to overlap. And so, when she later formed a discreet connection beyond her marriage, it was not recklessness. It was strategy refined by experience. This was not scandalous indulgence. It was insurance. Her ability to maintain loyalty at home while securing influence elsewhere demonstrated mastery of a system designed to control her. She did not escape the system. She bent it. The consequences extended far beyond Ferrara. Other courts took notice. Documentation, witnesses, and layered alliances became more common. The private sphere was no longer safe from political necessity. The bedroom became as consequential as the council chamber. Lucrezia's later years proved the success of this approach. With each child she bore, her position solidified. Each birth was not just personal continuity, but political reinforcement. She was no longer replaceable. She was foundational. The night of February 2nd, 1502, was not a scandal preserved for shock value. It was a window into how power truly operated when survival was fragile and trust non-existent. Strip away the romance, and what remains is clarity. In a world ruled by men and inheritance, a woman secured permanence. Through understanding the rules better than anyone else, Lucrezia Borgia did not escape her era's cruelty. She endured it, studied it, and learned how to navigate it without being destroyed. Her story is not about excess. It is about adaptation, about how intelligence and restraint can transform vulnerability into leverage. History remembers crowns and wars, but beneath them are quieter victories, won without banners or bloodshed. Victories that took place in silence, under watchful eyes, where the cost of failure was disappearance. Those moments shaped the world more than we are taught to admit, and they are still echoing.